and welcome to The Buck Stops Here Weekend Edition. I'm Ankita Mukherjee. It's a controversy that the government and the Congress party would desperately like to wish away in election season. Today, the Prime Minister's office rubbished as baseless and mischievous the contention of former media advisor to PM Sanjaya Baru that PMO files were seen by Sonia Gandhi. The top leadership of the BJP has launched a multi-pronged strike on both the Congress president and Dr Manmohan Singh, calling the latter a remote-controlled Prime Minister. And speaking to NDTV's Maya Meetandani, the Prime Minister's ex-aide said the book was not a betrayal, but Dr Baru raked up further controversy by claiming that in UPA 2, the whole focus was on Rahul Gandhi's succession and building his image. No attention was paid either to the Prime Minister or to the government.
आपको गूंगी बहरी सरकार चाहिए, लूली लंगड़ी सरकार चाहिए, अपाहिज सरकार चाहिए, रिमोट कंट्रोल से चलने वाली सरकार चाहिए, मरी पड़ी सरकार चाहिए।
बहुत सारी चीजें जो सारी दुनिया जानती थी उसको ऑथेंटिकेट किया है उनके सहयोगी ने, जिसको उन्होंने खुद ने चुना। मुझे लगता है कि आज तक जितने प्रधानमंत्री हुए हैं उनमें सबसे अधिक कमजोर प्रधानमंत्री ये है।
Are frustrated, especially since 2009, because the division of labor between the party and the government has worked remarkably well in UPA 1 and 2.
बैक सीट ड्राइविंग करें सोनिया गांधी और आगे जो ड्राइवर बैठा हो वो हो मनमोहन सिंह, तो जब बैक सीट ड्राइविंग होती है तो एक्सीडेंट होता ही होता है।
Former PMO official Sanjaya Baru's book continuing to kick up a political storm. While the BJP stepped up its attack today to corner the government, the PMO came out in defence, issuing a statement. The statement being attributed to a former media advisor to the Prime Minister that PMO files were seen by the Congress President Srimati Sonia Gandhi is completely baseless and mischievous. It is categorically denied that any PMO file has ever been shown to Srimati Sonia Gandhi. The book written by the former media advisor is an attempt to misuse a privileged position and access to high office to gain credibility and to apparently exploit it for commercial gain. The commentary smacks of fiction and coloured views of a former advisor. The question about comments of the former media advisor was raised by senior editors when they met the Prime Minister in October last year. His answer was, do not believe all he is saying.
The book does not claim to say anything that I was not personally aware of. The introduction, I very categorically said that this is really from my memory of what I saw and what I heard. As an intelligent analyst, one can speculate that I think in UPA 2 the whole game was about how to bring Rahul Gandhi in. And therefore the entire focus of the party and all the ministers was, what do you do in order to build the image of Rahul? Nobody was paying attention to the image of the Prime Minister and the government.
While the Congress has also questioned the timing of the book coming in the middle of an election season, the problems for the UPA are set to increase, with another book on the coal allocation controversy and the role of key players including the PMO set to come out on Monday.
Well, joining us tonight on the big discussion, senior journalists Siddharth Varadarajan and Shaupan Das Gupta. We're also going to be joined by Dr Abhishek Manu Singhvi, National Spokesperson of the Congress, and Prakash Javadekar, Rajya Sabha MP and National Spokesperson of the BJP. Well, let me begin with Shaupan Das Gupta. An insider account of the true state of affairs or a politically motivated book that's baseless and malicious as the Prime Minister's office has claimed today?
Well, you can always detect a certain degree of meaning into the timing of its release. But having read almost 3/4 of Sanjaya Baru's book, let me say that this is a book which should not be compared to M.O. Mathai's reminiscences about the Nehru age. This is a very serious book. In fact, most of the chapters are full of praise for initiatives of Dr Manmohan Singh, which weren't sometimes very apparent to people who were witnessing Indian politics at that time. He's generally supportive. Now, I think what is important is not so much the predictable reaction of the Congress party, which is understandable because there's an election, and anything which says that the entire effort was aimed at building Rahul Gandhi became the focus of UPA 2. Of course, the Congress will object to that.
Right.
That's only to be expected. I think far more significant to my mind is the fact that while the PMO has said this is a highly colored work of fiction, etc., there has been a stunning silence on the part of Manmohan Singh, who knew that this book was being written, who probably even had an inkling of what it would contain, and who knew very well Sanjaya Baru's oft-repeated proclamation that he was there in the PMO to serve Manmohan Singh and no one else.
Okay, interesting point there, and there seems to be this theory, Siddharth Varadarajan, that the Prime Minister knew what exactly what Sanjaya Baru was going to write about. He seems to suggest that it's an honest, Sanjaya Baru that is, suggests it's an honest and balanced account that highlights both the positives and the negatives. Has he set the record straight, do you think, or has he added to the ridicule?
The first point that I think we need to be clear about is that is the question of to what extent did the Prime Minister know what the book contained. And here we have no reason to doubt Sanjaya Baru's claim, since we're taking all his other claims or all his other revelations at face value. No reason to question his statement that the Prime Minister was not aware of the contents. And we also have evidence that I've seen that the Prime Minister's members of the Prime Minister's family are deeply upset at this book that Sanjay has written. So I think this is a non-issue that the PMs, that there's some kind of conspiracy between Sanjay Baru and the Prime Minister. You know, having said that, you know, in a country where it's very rare for officials to chronicle, to give an insider account of what happened, I think it's remarkable that Sanjay Baru has written this kind of book. It's for others to question his interpretation. He himself has a quote from Sharda Prasad, Indira Gandhi's legendary media advisor, where Sharda Prasad, when asked why don't you write more, says, look, I was only privy to a small part of the story. I can't pretend to know the whole truth. And Sanjay embraces that concept. And I think anybody who reads his book will be aware of that limitation. And it's for others to question his facts or question his interpretation.
Okay, and fair point. And I want to take this across to the national spokesperson of the Congress joining us now. Dr. Singhvi, the PMO categorically denying today that Sonia Gandhi was shown PMO files. Sanjay Baru actually says that he did not witness whether she physically saw these files or not, but she was certainly consulted. What about the contention then that Sonia Gandhi decided key appointments to the cabinet, to the PMO, that all credit for social initiatives went to the National Advisory Council, or for that matter directly to Rahul Gandhi?
I have heard the discussion for the last 5 minutes. Allow me my 1 minute. Firstly, I am aghast at hearing as experienced a person as Swapan Das Gupta making a distinction without a difference. Even the best BJP spokesperson wouldn't make a distinction between the Prime Minister not issuing a statement and the PMO issuing a statement. I don't know whether this country has reached a stage where a PMO issues a statement day before yesterday and yesterday, which the PM doesn't endorse, merely because the PM doesn't himself speak. There is a limit to how much motives we can attribute by making distinctions without a difference. Number two, there are a number of things which seem to have escaped the attention of Mr. Swapan Das Gupta. It escapes his attention that nobody at that level and at that post, in the proximate time, and that too in the middle of an election, not Mathai even, not Sharda Prasad, not a series of eminent predecessors and I'm sure successors will ever write like this, because it's an utter breach of confidence, assuming it to be true, which it is not. Thirdly, there is a breach of propriety. Fourthly, there is a oath of office which government servants also take, unlike ministers. It may not be legally a breach of that oath, but it is something which involves ethical dimensions. Fifthly, a person like Mr. Baru, and tomorrow Mr. Swapan Das Gupta could be privy to the same thing in a hypothetical BJP government as a press advisor. If he saw all this happening, would not I expect Mr. Swapan Das Gupta to stand up and protest very strongly that this is wrong, cabinet papers are going to the Prime Minister? Here is Mr. Baru writing about 2004 to 8. He writes 6 years after 8, that is in 2014. He neither protests in 04 to 08, nor from 6 to 8, nor from 8 to 14.
So you're saying that in these 8
Number
years,
seven.
Number
seven.
His silence
One
is
minute,
in a
let me
sense
complete.
complicity.
For all these nice distinctions made. And have you ever heard that an author says, no, you should not at least publish it during election time? PMO say that at the worst there was an agreement that he will not publish during election time, but the publishers are on an autopilot, they will publish it.
No, actually he said in his interview to NDTV today
Lastly,
that he wanted his book to reach the widest possible audience and then decided to take a call, even though originally he had said he would publish it after the election.
The phrase the widest possible audience is a euphemism for the highest commercial motive. You can call it widest possible audience.
All right,
I will call it pure
Let me just
greed.
bring the BJP in.
And
also.
lastly,
yes, very quickly.
It is just not done in this post that you seek re-employment in 2009, for whatever reason you are not re-employed, and you go and write a book in 2014. It is most unfortunate, and it doesn't matter whether it's a BJP government today, or a Congress government today, or a non-Congress, non-BJP government. All of us here on this panel should stand up for the fact that propriety demands that this be condemned.
All right, propriety was breached, but Prakash Javadekar, the BJP, going on this multi-pronged attack today, what is there in the book really that your party hasn't said time and time again before? Whether it's the notion of the dual power center, the powers of the Prime Minister being curtailed, you made these same points. So why highlight this book in particular?
This vindicates what we were saying all the while, that Prime Minister is in office but not in power, and power rests in Janpat. That was our conclusion after watching the process of decision making and actual decisions happening. And then we are now vindicated by a first person account from within the establishment, and that is what is important. And more importantly, now Congress has become suddenly ethical about that whether this should be printed and published this time or not. The content is the important. And content they are not disputing, they are just saying that no file was sent to Sonia Gandhi. There are many technicalities by which you can say this, but fact remains, because she has not signed, because she cannot, so you will say that was not so. But we know the practice that how the files and everything details, all secretaries and even everybody was going to Janpat to brief Madam and Rahul Gandhi, and that is what happened all the way. And NAC was pulling it from one side. And there is the issue that you have destroyed the institute of the Prime Minister. You have demeaned the institute of the Prime Minister, and that was an attack which is vindicated today.
Dr. Singh, we respond to that. The office of the Prime Minister really, does the book actually now seem to suggest that there was actually no dual power center at all, but a single power center, which was Sonia Gandhi?
Yes.
I made 7 or 8 points. I forgot to make. I made 7 or 8 points. I forgot to make 2 more. First of all, I have no quibble with the fact that the BJP has every right to say this is a political point. I was only saying that Mr. Baru, in his position, has no right to say it. BJP is a political party, they have a right to say it. Now, on the merits of it, the book is 90% subjective opinion. What are the facts to deny? The facts to deny are that there is no transfer of files as far as Sonia Gandhi is concerned. If anybody thinks that on certain issues a consultation between the party in power, President, and a Prime Minister will not take place, then they have another guess coming. That's not the way government functions. But most importantly, as an American author said, the reports of my demise are highly exaggerated. I remember from 2004, within weeks of the government taking power, the UPA, the BJP ND was so frustrated that the reports of the demise of the UPA were circulated from the first week. Deadlines of 30th September were put. On the ground that there is a duality of power, there is a remote control. The irony missed everybody that the biggest remote control of Indian political history of Nagpur is accusing this ideal division of power, harmonious division of power, of being a anarchical division. Thereafter, just consider, 10 years in this division of power have gone by. First, post-Nehru government which has achieved it. Is not that the best invalidation
of the
BJP's allegation of dual center of power from the first week? And one last point very quickly, half a second. The Prime Minister is on record from the first week of May 2004. He never pretended. He said everybody knows the mandate was Sonia Gandhi. He also said that Sonia Gandhi gives me strength to deal on a consensus basis with all the allies. He's never made any bones about it. So what is all this about? It is nothing but a rewriting of something which is well known But that doesn't amount to either remote control or dual center of power. This ideal, one last thing, the best,
okay, no,
it very rarely happens.
I have to bring,
it very rarely happens that the party in power it remains strong when the same party is in power in the government. These 10 years have shown the party and the government have both remained in power because of an ideal harmony between 10 Janpad and 7 RCR, something which the BJP can't understand.
Okay, an ideal harmony. Let me just quote to you what the book says about the media's pronouncement that Manmohan Singh, in effect, was the author of the Congress's victory in 2009, actually went ahead and unnerved the party to such an extent, the Congress's first family to such an extent that over the next few weeks he was quote-unquote defanged. Shravan Dasgupta, if you'd like to reflect on that.
Pure subjectivity.
Yeah,
Pure subjectivity.
Look, Mr. Singhvi, I know you like to be garrulous, but please give others a chance. Firstly, I think one can be sympathetic to those who raise the ethical question that whereas while Mr. Baru knew should he have spoken, should he have written. Now that there are different opinions on that. It's a call which ultimately Dr. Baru will have to take himself, whether what he did was ethical. I think far more important is that now that he has divulged what it is, let us take Manu Singhvi's thing that the mandate actually belonged to Sonia Gandhi to show that in a very systematic way how a prime minister who was set up by the Congress itself was systematically undermined. Does it require any breach of confidence to be able to say that after a very significant meeting in Washington with Condoleezza Rice, then Secretary of State, Pranab Mukherjee first went and briefed Sonia Gandhi and then casually strolled into Manmohan Singh's office 3 days later? Does it require any great breach of ethical is it an evidence of ethical impropriety to suggest that whereas a particular statement had been drafted by Ahmed Patel and been presented to the PMO and said, look, please read this out as the PMO's official release, which gave the entire credit for the extension of the Narendra program to Rahul Gandhi. It's the fact of it's trivial incidents like these which illustrate a larger point that the whole system was subverted.
The whole system was subverted, and this was the Prime Minister who ought to have resigned on several occasions but chose not to do so.
You know, if you read the book, and I've, like Shravan, read about 3/4 of it, the real story to my mind isn't some of the stuff about the 2 power centers and so on, which is all well known. That Sanjaya Baru presents this as his own assessment and, you know, has information and details, adds value to that perception. But the story that emerges is of a Prime Minister who in many ways also ends up getting compromised, and compromised not necessarily because of problems created for him by Sonia Gandhi or the Congress party. There's plenty of that too, but also by his own inadequacies or weaknesses or refusal to take a stand. And there's a line, I forget the exact quote in the book, where he speaks of the Prime Minister being very particular about his own morality, but not active about his own morality, passive about others. I think nothing captures the reason why the UPA goes off the rails after winning a spectacular re-election in 2009 and today standing at the gates of defeat than that one particular line.
Dr. Singhvi, there's a sense that you know, the Prime Minister was in fact just not allowed to even select a cabinet for himself in UPA 2. The moment he tried to put forward his candidates, that was shot down. He tried to resist the introduction of A. Raja. That was something that he had to give in to also. Where do you come in on all this?
Can I?
Yes.
You see, the problem also is that the author of this book seems to have, on some illusion of grandeur, assumed that he was the political advisor to the PMO, along with advisor in several other capacities and not merely a press advisor. He is opining on hundreds of issues on which he cannot be privy, he had no role. And he is giving subjective opinions. Now, I can understand the BJP as the political party criticizing, but for God's sake, you cannot take as gospel truth subjective opinions on purely political matters about which Mr. Baru has nothing to do. Secondly, this is the same Prime Minister who, on a known public opposition within the Congress party in many quarters, and I was the opening speaker on the 1-2-3 debate more than twice, still got his 1-2-3 through. there are 10 decisions, major ones, on which the press has written in the last 10 years, when, as in every large democratic system, including the Congress, there are different perceptions, and yet the UPA government, Manmohan Singh led government, got it through. How do you think for 10 years this system continued merely because there are elections now and there is so much of static and shouting? Do you think that a remote control and a duarchy of power, which is a failure and anarchy, would have continued for 10 years? It's an absolute nothing but a subjective perception on which commentators and BJP are alike riding piggyback.
Prakash Javadekar, comment on that.
Yeah, very simple. There are evidences around. When Rahul Gandhi tears the decision of the cabinet,
yes,
the Prime Minister was in foreign country, and the decision was taken in the Congress core committee where Rahul Gandhi himself was present. So the duplicity of the leadership in face of a public ire is noted. Whom you are demeaning? You are not ready to take discredit of the decision. You want to give discredit to the Prime Minister. You want to demean the institute. That's my first point. Another important point is that it reveals that it was one power center. I followed the coal scam. On my complaint, the CBI inquiry is instituted, and CBI is not inquiring into actually how these non-eligible parties came into being. I know for certain that there were chittis coming from the top party office bosses, and with whose permission they came, and only merely they were sanctioned without any proper due diligence, without anything done in the matter, and no appraisal, proper comparative appraisal was not there, and that's what has come before the Supreme Court. So what evidence
it's
you want?
interesting that you bring this up now.
The power was run from 10th,
both of this
from
book and also the former Coal Secretary P.C. Parak's book that's out tomorrow. He also, in advance copies of that book, we see P.C. Parak reinforcing really the image of a weak, dithering Prime Minister, unable to control his own junior ministers from, in effect, blocking the move to open up bidding.
Ankita, as a journalist, I find it very difficult to understand those who are questioning the timing of the release of this book, quite frankly. If Baru has written his memoirs, written about his time in the PMO, you have an election coming. You know, Penguin is not foolish to delay the publication of this book till after the elections, right? If the UPA is to be defeated in the coming election, the readability and marketability of this book will obviously be much less than what it is now. So you can't fault them for wanting to do that. I don't think that compromises what Baru has written. I don't think it compromises or should make us question his integrity. Far from it. I think the problem with the book, and coming to the substantive issues that it raises, is perhaps where his proximity to Manmohan Singh colors his overall assessment of the weaknesses of the government and of the Congress, where since the principal point of confrontation that he was witness to was the party leadership, party president versus Prime Minister, and he saw many things along that fault line. There are many institutional weaknesses with the Congress party. For example, in Siachen, lots of other things. The reason the party dithered was not so much because they didn't want credit to go to Manmohan as opposed to Sonia and Rahul, but simply because the party doesn't know where it stands on India-Pakistan relations. The party doesn't know where it stands on economic policy. This is a confused party in terms of its ideology, and many of the structural weaknesses manifest in UPA 2 but also in UPA 1 originate from this confusion and are not exclusively or entirely linked to the fact that this party is dominated by one family.
Loss hua kya? Voice ka?
All right, very quickly, Prakash Javadekar, final comments. We have to wrap this up.
Yeah, the issue is very clear that the government was run from 10 Janpath, and the proofs are coming from all sides now, and things are in the open. So basically they demeaned all the democratic institutes, including CAG, even the army and the even to an extent judiciary, and about importantly the PAC and other planning commission. So they compromised everything. So they compromised the PM post, the PMO, and that's where lies the real fault line in the democratic discourse today.
Real fault lines, and
they are guilty
no doubt
of
there will
doing
be.
that.
we will revisit the controversy once that second book is out tomorrow, the ex-Coal Secretary's tell-all book on Colgate. Well, we leave this discussion here, but on to the big photo opportunity of the day, and Narendra Modi must have been more than a little pleased about it. He met actor Rajnikant at his home in Chennai, and while the actor didn't actually make a statement endorsing Modi, the BJP will be hoping these pictures have the desired effect.
He's my good wisher and I am his good wisher. I wish him all the best.
My best wishes. Thank you.